You're sitting in a room full of people. There's laughter. There's conversation. Bodies are close. Voices overlap. The air is warm with human presence. And yet, somehow, you feel like you're watching it all from behind glass. You're there, but you're not there. You smile at the right moments. You nod. You participate in the performance of connection. But underneath it all, there's this quiet, aching awareness that no one in this room actually knows you. Not really. And the worst part? You're not even sure you'd know how to let them. This isn't shyness. This isn't introversion. This is something deeper, something more isolating. It's the experience of being surrounded by people and still feeling utterly, devastatingly alone. And here's the paradox. The very strategies you developed to survive emotional neglect, to navigate a world that didn't see you, those same strategies are now the walls keeping everyone out. The thing that once protected you has become the thing quietly destroying your ability to be known. You learned early that your internal world wasn't safe to share. Maybe your emotions were dismissed. Maybe vulnerability was met with punishment or indifference. Maybe you realized that being low maintenance was the only way to earn love. So you adapted. You became self-sufficient. You became the observer. You became someone who doesn't need. But the cost? You forgot how to be needed. You forgot how to reach. You forgot that connection isn't something you perform, it's something you risk. And now, even when you're surrounded by warmth, you remain cold. Not because you don't want closeness, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped believing you were worth being close to. This experience has a name in psychological literature: existential isolation. It's distinct from social isolation or emotional loneliness. Existential isolation is the felt sense that your inner subjective experience, your thoughts, feelings, memories, fears, is fundamentally inaccessible to others, that there is an unbridgeable gap between your consciousness and theirs. Psychologist Irvin Yalom described it as the gulf between self and other. No matter how close you get to someone, you can never fully merge. You remain, at your core, alone in your experience of being you. But for people who feel lonely even in a crowd, this isn't just a philosophical truth. It's a lived, painful reality that shapes every interaction. Let's understand the psychological architecture beneath this. First, there's attachment avoidance, a defensive relational strategy formed in childhood when emotional needs were consistently unmet. Children who experience emotional neglect or inconsistent caregiving learn that closeness is dangerous, that needing others leads to disappointment or rejection. So, they develop what John Bowlby called a compulsive self-reliance. They learn to deactivate their attachment system entirely. In adulthood, this manifests as emotional self-sufficiency that borders on isolation. You become someone who can be around people without ever being with them. You cultivate surface-level connections, pleasant interactions, but never depth. Because depth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like standing naked in front of a firing squad. Second, there's depersonalization and derealization dissociative states, where you feel detached from your own emotions or perceive the world as unreal, dreamlike, distant. This is what creates that glass wall sensation. Neuroscientifically, this involves dysregulation in the default mode network, the brain's self-referential processing system. When this network is chronically hyperactive or dysregulated, you become trapped in recursive self-observation. You're not experiencing the moment. You're watching yourself experience the moment. You're the audience to your own life. Third, there's what Carl Jung called the persona shadow split. The persona is the mask you wear, the socially acceptable version of yourself. For people who feel chronically unseen, the persona becomes everything. You perform normalcy, charm, agreeability, but your true self, your shadow, the messy, needy, angry, scared parts, those remain hidden, not just from others, but from yourself. This split is exhausting because no one is connecting to you. They're connecting to your performance. And deep down, you know it. You know that if they saw the real you, the one who feels too much, who needs too much, who is too much, they'd leave. So you stay lonely, even in a crowd. The emotional cost of this pattern is staggering. It's not just loneliness. It's a kind of invisible grief. You grieve the childhood. You didn't have the one where your feelings mattered, where someone saw you, where you didn't have to earn your worth through performance or silence. You grieve the friendships that never go deep, the relationships where you're liked but not truly known, the lovers who touch your body but never reach your soul. You grieve the version of yourself you could have been open, trusting, unguarded before the world taught you that being seen was dangerous. The philosopher Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Your dragon is this, the belief that your authentic self is unlovable, that your needs are burdensome, that if you stopped performing, stopped being fine, stopped pretending you don't need anything from anyone, you'd be abandoned." This belief doesn't announce itself loudly. It lives in the small moments, in the way you change the subject when someone asks how you really are, in the way you laugh off compliments because you don't trust them, in the way you sabotage intimacy right when it starts to feel real, because real means vulnerable, and vulnerable means unsafe. You become an expert at connection without intimacy, at presence without participation, at being surrounded by people while remaining utterly unreachable. And the cruelest part? People don't know you're suffering, because you've become so good at hiding it. Your loneliness is quiet, polite, invisible. You don't reach out because reaching out feels like admitting defeat, like exposing the gaping wound you've spent a lifetime concealing. So you wait for someone to see through your mask, to notice the emptiness behind your smile, to ask the question you're too terrified to answer. But they don't see. How could they? You've built your entire identity around being unseen. So the loneliness compounds, layer upon layer, year after year, until you're not even sure what connection would feel like if you had it. This is the philosophical weight. You've confused self-protection with self-preservation. You believe that the walls you've built are keeping you safe, but they're not. They're keeping you alone. And somewhere beneath all that armor, there's a part of you that's still waiting, still hoping, still believing that maybe, just maybe, someone will see you, really see you, and stay. If you recognize yourself in this pattern, you might notice these behaviors playing out in your adult life. In relationships, you might be the person everyone describes as low maintenance or easy to be around. But what they don't know is that you've eliminated all your needs from the equation. You don't ask for reassurance. You don't express when you're hurt. You don't communicate your emotional reality. And when someone tries to get close, really close, you create distance. You pick fights. You withdraw. You convince yourself they're too needy or too intense. But the truth is, intimacy terrifies you, because intimacy requires letting someone see the parts of you that you've been taught are unacceptable. In friendships, you become the listener, the therapist friend, the one who's always there for everyone else but never asks for help in return. You tell yourself you're just independent or private, but really, you've learned that your emotional needs are a burden. That being strong means never being vulnerable, so your friendships remain surface level, pleasant, safe, but never deep, because depth requires reciprocity, and reciprocity requires admitting you're not as fine as you pretend to be. In your career, you might overwork, overachieve, overfunction, because productivity is measurable, achievement is visible, but your internal emotional world, that remains hidden. You use accomplishment as a proxy for worth. If you're successful enough, busy enough, impressive enough, maybe you won't have to face the gaping hole where authentic connection should be. In your self-concept, you might feel like a fraud, like you're playing a character in your own life, like there's a real you buried somewhere beneath all the performance, but you've forgotten how to access it. You look at people who seem comfortable in their own skin, who share their feelings easily, who trust others with their vulnerability, and you feel like an alien, like everyone got a handbook on how to be human, except you. In your nervous system, you're in a constant state of hypervigilance, always scanning for danger, always monitoring how you're being perceived, always ready to adjust your mask depending on the audience. This is exhausting. It's why you need so much alone time to recharge. Not because you're an introvert, but because performing normalcy while suppressing your authentic self is energetically depleting. In your emotional regulation, you might intellectualize everything. You analyze your feelings instead of feeling them. You create distance through language. I'm processing some things instead of I'm hurting. I'm fine instead of I'm drowning. You've learned that emotions are dangerous, that naming your pain makes it too real. So you dissociate, you numb, you push through, until one day you realize you've lost touch with your own emotional landscape entirely. But here's what's crucial to understand. These aren't personality traits. These are coping mechanisms, strategies your nervous system developed to survive an environment where emotional authenticity wasn't safe. And the first step toward unlearning this pattern isn't fixing yourself. It's witnessing yourself. It's recognizing that the loneliness you feel isn't because you're broken. It's because you've been protecting a wound that's never been given permission to heal. Healing from chronic existential loneliness isn't about forcing yourself into more social situations. It's not about putting yourself out there or just being more vulnerable. Those approaches miss the point entirely. The healing happens in the quiet work of reconnecting with yourself first. Before you can let others in, you have to find your way back to the parts of you that have been in exile. This requires inner child reparenting, the practice of offering yourself the emotional validation and safety you never received. It's learning to say, your needs are not a burden. Your feelings are not too much. You are allowed to want, to need, to ask. It requires shadow work, the courageous act of turning toward the parts of yourself you've deemed unacceptable. The neediness, the messiness, the rage, the fear, not to fix them, but to integrate them. Because those parts aren't obstacles to connection, they're invitations to wholeness. It requires nervous system regulation, teaching your body that vulnerability doesn't equal danger. This might look like somatic practices, breath work, therapy modalities like EMDR or somatic experiencing. It's learning that your hypervigilance, while adaptive once, is no longer necessary, that you can lower your guard without being destroyed. But most importantly, it requires making a radical choice, to practice softness over survival mode, to reach out even when it feels terrifying, to share your truth even when your nervous system screams at you to stay hidden, to let someone see you, really see you, and trust that you can survive whatever comes next. This doesn't mean becoming recklessly vulnerable with unsafe people. It means learning discernment, learning that not everyone deserves access to your inner world, but someone does. And you are worthy of finding that someone. The psychiatrist and philosopher Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, wrote, "An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior." Your loneliness isn't a defect. It's a reasonable response to an environment that taught you that being seen was dangerous. Your self-protection made sense. It kept you alive. But you don't have to live that way anymore. You can choose, slowly and carefully, to build a different kind of life. One where connection doesn't require performance, where vulnerability doesn't equal annihilation, where being known, truly known, becomes the most sacred gift you can give and receive. The goal isn't to never feel lonely again. The goal isn't to be fixed. The goal is to become whole, to integrate all the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide, to learn that your authentic self, messy, needy, imperfect, is not only lovable, but necessary. Because the world doesn't need another performance. It needs you, the real you, the one you've been hiding behind all those walls. And maybe, just maybe, there's someone out there who's been looking for exactly that. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you're ready to do this work, know that healing is possible. Not quick, not easy, but possible. Because you were never meant to carry this alone.